on? Star Wars customizable cards. Heard of them?
Should I have?
Fight for the galaxy.
Indeed.
I'm like that. Joe's dark side.
Battle for Tatooine. TIE Fighter Power 1.
X-Wing Power 3 with torpedoes.
Who's gonna fly it?
Biggs. Yes!
I'm not such a bad pilot myself.
Then buckle up, because this set's ready to play.
Star Wars customizable cards, the Galaxy in a box. Featured cards assorted randomly.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another wonderful episode of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. My name is Jeff May, and I'm one of your co-hosts.
And I am Dre Alvarez, the uncommon card in the deck next to the rare 2, or maybe ultra rare, Jeff May.
The R2s, those were the rare 2s were rough. I wouldn't call myself a rare. I've done enough of these podcasts.
Actually, sorry. Let's take a step back. Is rare 1 better than rare 2? I get the numbers.
Rare 1s were the better ones, yeah.
Oh yeah, so rare 2 is like the stupid, like the Han Seeker or whatever. These stupid things that no one wanted.
Yep, the Seekers. Although I feel like the Tarkin Seeker was an underappreciated card, but that doesn't matter.
So Jeff, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the Decipher Star Wars customizable card game, a card game that is very, very near and dear to my heart and personality. It is something that has shaped me as a person, and we are starting our season on collectible card games with the one that, in my opinion, is the GOAT, maybe. Which I know it's not, but for me it was, and it is. Now, this game by Decipher, it's not the first card game that Decipher made. They actually had done Star Trek before that. But this one came out at the end of 1995. We got all the way up to the end of 2001. So there was a 6-year time when we had one of the greatest card games of all time. It was always number 2 behind Magic the Gathering. We're not to say that would have kept at number 2. I mean, if we see where Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh are now, it would be hard to say it would have maintained that. But man, Star Wars sure is something.
There was this very interesting window as a Star Wars fan. I would say the mid-90s that was kind of, I would call like peak hype fan. So there's the extended universe, all these great authors writing, side books that are really creative. Yeah, there's obviously the merchandising juggernaut is, full hog. I worked at Target in the mid 90s, and, obviously the toy aisle was a big deal. Yeah. The card game comes out. You
got to remember too that the toys, like, they rebooted. Kenner had to reboot them to keep the license, which is why the new Power of the Force ended up running out.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Before that, they were just releasing like little bendies to keep the license. There was there was almost a 10-year gap, other than because there were like, I think, Micro Machines maybe, but there was Star Wars action figures didn't exist after the ending of, I believe, the Power of the Force / Ewok / droids run.
Oh God!
Up until when Kenner re-released the Power of the Force, I believe in 1995 as well.
Real okay, so I didn't even realize that, because I remember that toy aisle being huge. The card game, of course, we've talked. Some of the video games were great. The Super Nintendo run were fantastic. So if you were a Star Wars fan, like 1995 is amazing. There's the extended universe. There's these amazing toys. There's these amazing LucasArts was a juggernaut as a video game industry.
But you know what there wasn't?
Good
movies. There just wasn't movies. That's one of the interesting things about Star Wars, is that it is a movie franchise that existed almost entirely lifted up by all of the sort of secondary and tertiary things about it. It's the merchandising and it's the expanded universes that kept Star Wars alive for quite some time. I mean, obviously everybody loved Star Wars, like, it's such a big deal. But when you look at huge films that come around along a similar vein, like The Matrix, for example, like how much lore got built from The Matrix. You had like a couple video games, and
the Animatrix was good. The video games were pretty cool.
Yeah, but like that's.
Although I'll make a theory, and it kind of falls into the same point, which is like mid 90s. I didn't realize that about the Kenner license, but that you're and just checking the action figure aisle at the time that were awesome. Those were Kenner. That was that brand. It wasn't someone else like Mattel or whatever.
Mm-hmm. It was Kenner.
Okay, just checking. So the Kenner toys are awesome. They're amazing toys. The video games are awesome. the extended universe, the books are pretty good. If you're a young adult, they were really great. They had a great run of young adult books that were just fantastic. The card game comes out. If you are a Star Wars fan, this is peak time. And I argue what happened. Prequels came out. So there was all this hype leading up to the prequels. A bunch of us, like our age, were very similar. Like we saw the prequels and we are like, I'm going to college. And I think you stuck around a little longer than me, but I think that kind of explains like what happened.
The game didn't affect the prequels didn't affect my love of the game. Okay, so I want to get to the game itself, because yes, like Star Wars was this weird thing that was kept alive by its supplemental sources. That was like a very big deal at the time. They were re-releasing the special editions for, well, there's at least money involved in that, whether or not they were better or worse. I mean, we see the glaring problems with those special editions, the Han shooting second kind of thing, exactly, you know. But in reality, like, Star Wars fans needed stuff. There were Dark Horse comics and stuff. We ate it up. Now, we have this card game that comes out. Now, 1995, I am 13 to 14. So when the game first is released, I am 14 years old. That's prime for a little nerd to sort of be like, all right, I guess I'm getting into this. You know, Magic had just become a thing. People were playing it, but that wasn't really my world. And then it was actually my friend's mom. Like, I was at my friend's house and doing chores with them, and she was like rewarding us. And what she did is she took us to Toys R Us and was like, get whatever you want. And I had seen recently that there was like the cards were becoming valuable, and that was the collector era. And so I got the 2-player set, the introductory 2-player set. It is what a lot of people started with. Yeah, it came with white borders, including unique Vader and Luke cards that ended up being garbage. But I was like, ooh, the Vader card, I heard that's worth money. Bought it.
And that Luke card is him like holding the speeder, right?
The T-16 Skyhopper, yeah. The model of the Skyhopper. And there's Vader just standing in like
Skyhopper, not speeder, Jeff. No one's gonna forgive me for that mistake. But continue.
Hey, there's a reason that I know all the semantic bullshit of this property, and it's because of this card game. So I got this 2-player card game. Me and my friend played it. We didn't really know certain rules, proper rules, but we were like, oh, this is great. And we became addicted. We just were like super into it. And we started playing over and over and over again. And we started like, I need more cards.
So Jeff, we on this show, you and I have a dichotomy. So Jeff, on the show, you and I will back and forth bandy about the different types of nerds.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, when I was like, I did some catch up. You had a great YouTube channel. I'll try and make sure to include in the links or tweet out when this comes out, where I was like watching over like game review and stuff. And as a math person, I'm watching all like the math involved and the steps. And it's like, it is literally like a program, a computer program with a bunch of manual math at each step. I saw you bash in our script the concept of dice. One of these YouTubers, what he'll do is he says, hey, I like using a dice in this game just as like a manual counter. Like I can use the dice to keep track of like force points and whatever. And you're like, fuck dice, it's a card game. So I was watching.
You shouldn't have to have. Never mind. Go ahead.
We're going to let you go on this, friend. But my basic point is I'm watching this going, this is the most computer programming math nerd game I have ever seen. I don't know if I'd be interested in it. And I do find it amusing that you held on longer than me, given where our respective paths went.
Now, dice. So the dice was used in Wizards of the Coast.
I'm saying this guy used it just supplementary. He's saying you could take this card game and add a dice to help with all the counting, because that's how much freaking counting there is in this game.
I don't mind using, like, Magic the Gathering is a good example of using a D20, because you'd start with 20 life, and like you move it when you take the hit, you'd move it to show where you are. I don't mind using dice as a counter, because you could use anything for a counter. I could use my cell phone for a counter. A calculator would work. That's fine. What I have a problem with is when, spoiler alert, this game was murdered by Lucasfilm and Wizards of the Coast. Even though the game was pretty successful, I don't know why they were just like, well, let's go to the Magic the Gathering people, and they made a terrible game. And that terrible game involved dice rolling. Card games should not require dice. That means it's not a card game. Like, if you're using a die to keep track of your own shit, but you could do that on a piece of paper. That's one thing. But if you're like, now roll dice to see if your shot was effective, to me, it no longer becomes a card game. But I am very much digressing. I'm jumping towards the end of the episode.
I love it. I love it, man. This is great. I do want to give just the official timeline. We kind of had started that. 1995, Decipher gets the license to the Star Wars customizable card game. They released 12 sets up through 2001.
Yeah.
They go through episode 1. Arguably, Lucasfilms gives them some feedback on what they want in the card game, which they include. And then in renegotiations between episode 1 and episode 2, they lose the license. One of the complaints the card game did get, I'll be very interested to hear your thoughts on this, was some of the gameplay, the clunkiness I was just talking there. What happens next is they do what seems like the logical thing. They take this game that might be too niche, they take it to Wizards of the Coast with Magic the Gathering, one of the most popular card games. I'm apologizing, I'm forgetting his name, but they take the designer of the original Magic the Gathering game and say, hey, you take this game, you make a more generally appealing one. That is the Star Wars trading card game. I got dinged on a show for that, for confusing the two. By you correctly so, Jeff. That is a yellow card offense. Wizards of the Coast gets the Star Wars trading card game, which includes dice. So it's, who knows if it's even a card game. That lasts about 4 years and then kind of vanishes. I would argue
it limped for 4 years.
And I mean, I think some of like, we can talk about timing of like if the prequels underperforming, people, it not being a great game, which is just kind of shocking.
Their first game was the worst Star Wars movie of all time. That's a big, they did Attack of the Clones, and that's, they're trying to make money off of it.
Oh, okay. Interesting, Jeff. Sorry. You think Attack of the Clones is worse than Phantom Menace?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it is what it is. But
future nerd shows will have to do that for fun.
So it was sort of killed and replaced by the Star Wars trading card game, I believe is what it was called at the time.
Then the last part, just for the timeline, which I know we'll go in depth, then what really happens is there is a Star Wars card game committee.
Yes, there's a thing called the Players Committee, and they are sort of the stewards of this game.
And so not only do they keep it alive, they start releasing what are known as virtual sets. So they do make new cards, new editions. These aren't officially sanctioned by LucasArts, Decipher, or Wizards of the Coast, but that's in part why the games keep alive, as well as I'm assuming keeping around like tournament play, interacting. Because that for me, one of my backstories, which I'm assuming we'll go back to in a second, is really like there just weren't a lot of people. There wasn't a huge community to play with. There was an online community to talk about like trading and stuff. But in terms of, say, going to a local library, et cetera, to play people, I didn't have that in my neighborhood. And in high school, the people played Magic. So
so you didn't have like a region place that you would go and find out this information? We used to find out where our tournaments were by reading Inquest and Scry. In the back, it would tell you where there were going to be.
We're going to have to explain magazines to people on the show, Jeff. But yeah, so, I mean, yeah, basically for me, it was kind of like fun collecting, couldn't really ever get a community to play with, and then kind of outgrew it. And I would argue, maybe the game isn't. So let's get into that though, Jeff, because like I said, the gameplay of this, I've seen mixed comments on the Wikipedia, for instance. One reviewer was like, this is an amazing game, great, 5 out of 5. And another guy was like, game looks absolutely fantastic, like clunky gameplay. And then there are comments all over the place in the script and in the research about like later iterations trying to add things. The episode 1 deck, as an example, involves Senate battles, Jeff, which that is what we need in a card game about Star Wars. So, yeah, if you want to explain some of the...
So when we talk about like rules coming about, when we talk about sort of things being like, like you have to do this, you have to do that. So Magic the Gathering was obviously very popular at the time. And the sort of story of Magic the Gathering was, ooh, you're a wizard and you're summoning spells. The way the Star Wars card game worked, the way you kind of look at it is you're a script writer. You're creating a new alternate Star Wars storyline by having these things happen. That's the way I kind of viewed that. So you have what is essentially battles. You have cards of characters, cards of vehicles, cards with weapons and devices and things like that. So you have one way of sort of winning the game is by battles. And then the other way you win the game is by what they would call a force drain, where if you control a certain area, you would drain them.
Almost like Risk. If you get a big enough map created where you've got people placed at all of those locations that your opponent can't kick out. I think in the first deck, like Yavin, the Rebel base, and
Yavin
the Death
4.
Star, they're both respective bases. So those things would have restrictions. They'd go, hey, if you want to put a character here, they have to, have a spaceship. They have to have a reason. So one way you could start doing like force control, like you're saying, is you deploy a home base, you deploy characters there, and your opponent isn't able to deploy them without using shenanigans.
So the ultimate goal is to eliminate your opponent's life force, meaning their deck, meaning you want all of the cards that they have available to use in the lost pile. So we start, every deck is 60 cards, and that's basically and then you go about it by doing things like battling, and you do things like force draining and things like that, causing your opponent to lose force. That's the process, that's the system, that's what you do, and there are ways in and around it. All locations are given what are called like force icons, meaning like, oh, can I deploy a character here? Only if you have a force icon. They have like deployment restrictions. And like certain cards have deployment restrictions. Dagobah might have force icons, but you can't actually deploy a character to there unless it says they can deploy there. It's very interesting. Like, and that's a very limited number of people. I think it's like Yoda, son of Skywalker, and daughter of Skywalker.
Isn't there a snake too that's a character or a creature?
Well, there are creatures. No, it's not a character. It's a creature, because just like Magic the Gathering, after a certain point in time, there are new card types that are introduced. There are new, so we have new card types being dropped. We have new, like play methods, things that are like, oh, okay. Like, for example, in the base set, you only have like, so we had Premiere. Premiere is what we get in 1995 to start, right? And you get your character cards, which included most of your main characters in their introductory. This is the character the first time you see them. Here are their stats. This is what they go through.
First time you see them, episode 4.
Essentially, yes. And so some of them are going to be overpowered. Darth Vader, for example, that was a card that started out the gate being worth $50 in 1995 because he was the most powerful character and the hardest to kill. So he was the best you could get out there. Luke was barely half as good as that.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna cheat. We can you've got it in front of you as well, but I want to ask about the card. So I've got a Darth Vader card in front of me.
Yeah.
To your point of things, let's talk character cards briefly. He's got a power and ability.
Let me tell you, I'm not looking at the card right now. I don't have a card in front of me.
We're gonna do a test on.
Are you
Jeff.
gonna do a test?
Darth
Go
Vader Premiere in front of me.
Don't show it,
Jeff. What can you? And it does. And here's the cool thing: it's not even going to show up in the camera. It's blurry.
Yeah, no.
So Jeff, what can you tell me about this card? I'm going to start at the top. Whatever you fill in, I'll give you 1 point.
Destiny 1. So the Destiny is when you draw him not as the actual character, but when you draw him as a part of your force. Like a lot of times you have Destiny. Destiny is sort of like what is added to, for example, your battle Destiny. Is if you have a certain ability, you would add battle destiny. I'm not going to make this show a how to play the Star Wars customizable card game. There are much better YouTube videos about this. That's not what people want on this show, right?
By the way, Jeff, as this is something we are wont to do, I would basically argue these little numbers on the top of the card, they're basically faux dice, but proceed.
Nope. Anyway, it's only if that were the case, you would say that only if you were allowed to stack the dice and whatever, but Destiny is all a part of the game. You draw it for like canceling stuff. It's a whole thing. So he's a 1 Destiny. That's the second lowest you can go. There's also zeros. But 1 was considered the lowest at the time. The only zeros were like locations. And then I think at one point, like there's like R2 in Red 5 is a 0. But anyway, so you have that. He is, there's obviously his lore, which I haven't looked at in a long time, but he adds 3 to the power of anything he pilots, if you're looking at his game text. To attrition less than 5.
Okay, and also when in battle, he adds 1 to each battle destiny.
Yes,
and he adds 4 to the power and 3 to the maneuver when piloting
Vader's
custom tie. And then, okay, these 2 numbers I do want you to explain though. So on the bottom left hand,
it's his deploy is 6, so it costs 6 force for you to get him out.
So he's expensive.
So it's his summoning cost if you want to do a Magic the Gathering thing. But his forfeit is 8. Meaning that if you lose him, you satisfy a loss of 8. Now,
okay, and this is one thing that I'm sorry, Jeff. I know it's got to be the lamest part of the show, but I just need it for me, Jeff. I need to understand
know what attrition is, don't you?
So this is one of the key parts of the game, and I would argue if people are talking clunky rules, this thing called attrition. So let's explain
McClunky rules.
McClunky. I don't get it.
Okay, so first off, I also forgot to add that he's power 6, ability 6, but that's fine. So attrition, so like there's battle damage, which is how much you lose a battle by, right? So like if you have, if you've got your total power when you add everything together is 20, right? And then you draw your battle destiny and it's 4. Okay? So now you have a total power of 24. But you also have 4 attrition. And attrition is you have to lose this no matter what. So attrition is like, okay, well, this, and say the other person had, 15. You have 24, they have 15.
You beat me by 9. All right.
You
So
beat me
Jeff's
by,
got
I beat you
24.
by 9, right? You have to lose 9 cards. However, 4 of them, 4 force, has to be lost directly from that battle.
And how is attrition calculated in the battle, though?
So, well, it's the number you draw, right? So the battle destiny that you draw, say it's a 4, right?
So in a given battle, both you and I, almost like war, we both draw a card and show it to each other. And you're telling me whatever number that shows, regardless of if I win or lose the battle, I'm going to have to lose that. If I lose the battle, though, you're saying that has to come from like my hand?
Some of it does. No, so the attrition, like say you lost by 9, right? You lose by 9.
And I drew a 2. Let's say I lose by 9, I drew a 2.
Okay.
You win by 9 and you drew a 6.
Okay.
Let's put
so
that
that means that even though I don't have to lose any force, I have to satisfy 2 attrition from the battlefield, meaning I have to lose something from that battle. So something from the battle that happened, even though I won, even though you win a war, some people die, right?
Yeah, or like you beat me, but I shot you. So yeah, your astromech got hit or something.
So let's say, for example, you lose a character like Obi-Wan Kenobi or whatever. Say you had Obi-Wan and you were like, well, I'm going to lose him. He's got a forfeit of 9. That satisfies everything. Because you lose your 9 force and 4 of them came from the battle, right?
Gotcha.
So you're like, I'm done. Or you could be like, oh, I'm losing this character with a forfeit of 4. And now I have to lose 5. Well, I'll lose 5, these 3 cards from my hand because I don't want to use those. And I'll use these 2 from my, used pile or whatever it is. So you would end up having to satisfy that attrition.
One last question for the semantics of this. Apologies, Jeff. In the battle, let's say you have Darth Vader, I have Obi-Wan. We don't have any weapons. We initiate a battle. You just have an amazing draw. You draw 6. I draw 5. What happens there? Do I just have to lose Obi-Wan?
Yeah, we both have to lose it. Now, if you drew a 4, see, they're immune to attrition less than 5. So if there's only a 4, well, it's like, well, I don't have to satisfy that attrition. It's not a problem because I'm immune to it. So
interesting. So if I had 3 characters at the battle, and like, let's say I had like a Luke who I think is less than 3, Obi-Wan less than 5, and I think there are some other random characters less than 2, and I drew like a 1. It's like, oh, if all of them are immune less than that. Now, one last question, Jeff, sorry. And then let's use this to jump to the next set of cards is there are basically weapons and equipment. So that's a card type.
So of the card types that we are introduced to in Premiere, we have characters, and those were usually, those were aliens, droids, and then rebels or Imperials, depending on where you are. You had vehicles, both ground and space vehicles. You had locations, both battleground sites and then systems. So you could have, Tatooine Mos Eisley, but you could also have the Tatooine planet. Okay. Then you had effects, which are things that you put out that affect the play of the game. Interrupts that stop things from happening, usually, like an effect or something like that. And then the most common ones that they used at the time were sense and alter, which is, those interrupts were the ones that canceled other things. So, and then you had, and then the rule was that the dark side goes first. Now, in the beginning of this game, the name of the game was what we call mains and toys, meaning people won because they would get 4 copies of Darth Vader, 3 copies of Luke, Grand Moff Tarkin, and they would just be like, well, I have the most valuable cards. I'm winning. Like mains and toys. These are the most powerful characters and their lightsabers or, whatever. This is what we do. And that was kind of broken. It was a broken system. So as we start moving forward, that style of win, which is just like, well, I'm just going to be more powerful than you because I have more powerful cards. They're like, well, how can we sort of make this more even? Now, we did not get Chewbacca, R2D2, or the Death Star until we got A New Hope, which is the first expansion, along with a new card type, which was called Creatures, which don't have an allegiance. They just kind of attack. And we got that with the Dianoga. So the little the little garbage monster. And we also got introduced to a cards called Epic Events. They were like, all right, well, we already have this game where they're battling and they're force trading. How can we make this more like Star Wars? Well, let's blow up the Death Star or blow up a system. And so
I'm not sure if this applies to the Epic event, but a common thing that showed up, for instance, pod racing shows up later. We're going to have a lot to say on that in a bit, Jeff. But namely, one of the YouTubers I was listening to was like, the game in some cases turned into solitaire, because if Jeff makes a blow up the Death Star deck and Dre just makes like a standard deck, then Jeff might be over here, pardon the pun, playing with himself, trying to blow up the Death Star. And I'm like, well, I can't deploy anything there. I don't have starships for that. I'm going to be over here just like force draining on like the forest moon of Endor or something.
So now it comes down to is how are you going to create a deck to be able to combat most strategies where you're going to be able to beat somebody that is adding a new strategy. These epic events were very interesting because they were kind of tough to get done, but when you would do them, it would be really interesting. And we're going to see another one. Oh, there's also like, there was dumb shit added. Like they added the Dejaric hologame board, and you could literally use hologram cards as little characters, which I did. I used the Imperial holotable on one of my decks because there was a card later where you could it was like basically the Emperor. It was a version of the Emperor as
and you said one more comment in A New Hope. So bluff rules.
Bluff rules is the other thing. And that was just one site where you could like lie about putting cards under to add to force trains, and people would call it was weird. It was a very gambly way of playing it, and nobody really used it. Anyway.
As a high level question just about the game, because we're on the first expansion and this keeps going. I'm really curious your opinion on how complicated and convoluted this world gets in terms of what that does to its Magic. It seemed like very straight, almost. I think the metaphor, and we might have a show on Magic. I think it's on deck unless it gets kicked off. Hey, but I don't get it. But anyway,
on deck of cards.
Yeah. Oh, it was a pun. I thought you were doing like a commercial. I didn't know if that was like a Magic commercial or something, like Snap into a Slim Jim or something. But anyway, sorry, Jeff. Exactly. All right. So that one I got. All right.
Okay.
The reference but all I was going to say is Magic seemed very generic. Basically copying Dungeons and Dragons in card form is the kind
I think that's an easy way to put it now that Magic has been so powerful for 30 years.
But yeah, so to your opinion, though, is any of the intricacies of the rules of Star Wars CCG, do you think that impacted the popularity of the game, playability of the game itself?
I don't. And here's why. First off, it was collectible and people liked that. So people were buying cards.
That was definitely why I was into it. Yeah.
But beyond that too, like one of the things is that Decipher made a smart idea where they released what was called unlimited sets. The premier set where you get your base cards, your Vaders, your Obi-Wans or whatever, they like never stopped making that set really. So there you can see there are black border cards that's limited. They were like, well, these are limited. And then the white border ones, they were like, we're just going to make these forever. So they were considered less valuable. And eventually what would happen is white border went from being about being limitations to about revising certain cards that were broken. So for example, if a card they accidentally released it incorrectly, when they would do the white border set of that, it would sort of errata the card itself.
Were there rules? I know Magic's got stuff like that in terms of like tournaments where certain cards are outlawed from play or whatever. With Star Wars CCG, with the Players Committee do stuff like that, we're like, oh yeah, the black border run of this card is broken. The white border says this.
Yeah, so they would be like, send in your card, we'll send you. There were a couple cards like that. Asteroid Sanctuary is I would say the one that people use most. And there was also a version of a card called Electro Binoculars that essentially made it so that you could cycle through and predict your own.
This is apocryphal. I don't know if this is true, Jeff, but gotta throw this out. Once I made it to college, so I'm way past playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I had some I lived in a nerd frat house, but I didn't join the frat, but was around a lot of nerds. And I was talking to someone, he said one of his friends was an amazing Star Wars CCG player that like would win at nationals. and said this guy was responsible for getting a card banned, and it was those electro binoculars, saying that he was basically able to use that to like view the entire deck just
You get
over
to
and over and over.
you can cycle through your entire deck and you can set up for what essentially amounts to like spending one force. You would be able to put the most devastating things. And so they ended up having to change that card. And they did that in the white border set. They fixed
And
it.
I'm asking, do you know that person or aware? Because I don't know if this is an apocryphal, like, hey, I heard my best friend did this and maybe they're lying. But allegedly, I was one step removed from the person that started playing that and got that rule revised.
Here's what I'm going to say.
Star Wars CCG.
Here's what I'm going to say. One person isn't going to do that. We all figured that trick out. Like most of us did. And so it's not about the one person that won the championship so much as it is, oh, everybody's doing this because it's breaking the entire game. So it's an everybody thing, not just a one person thing.
Gotcha.
But obviously it worked and got him to that position. So I would, and again, it might be apocryphal. It might be them being like, okay, yeah, maybe this is a problem. So we finish episode 4 with these 2 sets and we move to Empire Strikes Back. We're going to get 3 sets from Empire Strikes Back. Hoth, Dagobah, Cloud City, right? The 3 main settings of this set. Now, Hoth is another one of those like entry-level thing. We are introduced to the idea of personas, meaning Luke Skywalker evolves over the course of this film series. The cards are going to evolve as well. So we create a Hoth-based character named Commander Luke. We are introduced to AT-ATs, which sort of levels everything out on the ground, a little more dominant towards the dark side. And then we also get like energy shield rules, which are if you're the rebels on Hoth, the dark side can't deploy directly to where you are. They have to start from the 4th marker out and work their way in.
So, and from a collectible side, I really want to highlight this set because I found this fascinating. You just pointed out there was the premier set, these black borders that are super valuable.
Mm-hmm.
They also had the unlimited, these white packs that you could always just buy forever if you wanted to just expand your set. And then, of course, I remember even in the 90s, there were websites like Horribly Made, ones that look a lot like
like Angel Fire,
where if you wanted to like order a bunch of like stormtroopers for like a white border stormtroopers, because for instance, I seem to recall like Darth Vader had something about being able to deploy a bunch of stormtroopers next to him. And then, of course, the counteraction is like Obi-Wan is able to make them all go away. So if you have Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, you could literally have like a chain of just like Darth Vader summons a stormtrooper, Obi-Wan makes him go away. That stuff's kind of fun.
A little bit. It's a little bit like that. Yeah. But I mean, it's like you can't just summon things immediately during a battle unless it's like a react, but whatever.
You have to follow like a programmatic chain of command as if you were a software developer.
So they're adding new ideas. They're like, well, Luke gets missing on Hoth, so they have like a going missing thing, and it's basically very Hoth centric. We move to Dagobah, and
but sorry, I was going to say on the collectible side though, the unlimited sets were garbage value wise compared to the black border for the first 2.
Premier.
For Hoth though, they try and keep that thing up. They're like, okay, we're going to release the initial run, black border. We'll release this unlimited run, white border.
Revised now. They changed it to revised. It wasn't unlimited because it wasn't that we're doing this forever. It's that we're releasing these to make adjustments.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense because I was going to say with Hoth, they didn't really release just a ton of white borders over and over. And so in that regard, the white border Hoth cards is actually a rare set, which is kind of funny from what had happened with the premier set of the white border speed.
Hoth and Dagobah are the ones they're the ones to go for at that point in time. So,
and then we're going to start talking about some of the weird rule changes, et cetera, on Dagobah.
Yeah, there were new rule changes. That really shifted it because what you got was all of the bounty hunters other than Boba Fett from the dark side, and you got the executor or executor, depending on how you want to say it. I always preferred executor because that seems like that's what they would call it, but whatever. Now it's more, the focus goes less from like clashing to more of like a deck manipulation thing. We have asteroid rules. We have Yoda, who essentially is this kind of pacifist character. So like he can exist, but it's going to be very hard for the dark side to even access his character. And you would get Son of Skywalker and you would have Jedi tests. So you would literally have this situation where you would be testing, you would be using Yoda to test Luke and to get all these things. And every time you would do a Jedi test, it would change the format of the board in a much better, advantageous way for the light side. That's the last set that was white border, and those cards tend to be a bit more valuable, although there's not a ton of very valuable cards in Dagobah. I'm going to see if I have it available on me. No, I don't right now, but like I have the Executor as a white bordered card.
Oh, interesting. I've got the black border Executor in front of me.
Nice.
And Executor makes sense to me, by the way. I'm gonna agree with that.
Yeah. So then we go to Cloud City. Now, Cloud City is one of the most printed runs of the whole thing. And it is it adds a new thing called dueling, which people are going to start getting into. We finally got bounties, which I was waiting for quite some time.
And how did bounties work? I'm actually curious how those worked and if they lived up to your expectations.
So bounty hunters, when you kill somebody in a battle, bounty hunters and only bounty hunters could basically find a way to, or bounty hunters and warriors, excuse me, could find a way to capture characters instead of having lost them. There's a card called We Have a Prisoner that was very big for that. And there are also cards that supplement your bounty hunters in ways that they can just automatically capture people when they're hit or whatever. You got Lando, but you got two versions of Lando. You had a good guy Lando and a bad guy Lando. That was awesome. Guy Lando could immediately replace. It was a very interesting way to do it. If you were using Dark Side Lando, you very much had to protect him, or else they would just take Light Side Lando and replace him. This is where I start to shine. I had already done some pretty cool stuff in tournaments with Dagobah. Dagobah actually ended up causing me to win my first tournaments handily, because deck manipulation was something I was much better at than having more cards that were valuable. Once you had to like learn to outsmart the player. I mean, it was obviously intellect is important, but it's not the same when it's just like, well, I lost my Vader and I'll just deploy another Vader. Like it's one of the, like it was a money thing. Like most of these things, like the people that were wealthier did better. Dagobah fought that. I mean, I used to have challenges. I was like, can I win with a deck that's worth less than $60? Right? Because when you see like Darth Vader, that's a $50 card. And you'd check like Inquest or Scry or something in the price guides. So you're like, can I do that? And I did. And it was because of Dagobah and Cloud City, where I found ways that I could win as a pacifist and frustrate somebody and use their own momentum against them. And that's something that you weren't really able to do in the first couple of sets.
So, Jeff, I definitely have some questions about tournament play for you. And for the record, at least one of the tweets about this show is going to be Jeff May is the Billy Bean of Star Wars CCG. I'm very much looking forward to that. Because you're doing that. You're like, I moneyballed Star Wars CCG. Yep. How can I replace Darth Vader in the aggregate, right? You get a Dagobah snake. You get you get a Jedi training.
We had once Cloud City came out, we ended up doing the money challenge, which was, can you win a tournament based off of not making any powerful things, which means you have to use more common and uncommon cards or really low key rares. So like I did a Dagobah set that was Yoda in his little hut, right? And I would have him out there. It was the only thing that I put out. The only character and the only location that I put out was this, right? And the way that worked is I would be able to get Yoda out by my second turn.
Then you had some like summoning thing or whatever, or the site itself.
The site itself allowed you to pull Yoda, right? So I had that set up, right? They can't get to me because the Dagobah system, the planet didn't exist, so they couldn't come and land a ship. And the only ship you really could land, I think, was at the time like maybe like the Houndstooth or something like that, or it was the only
from the dark side, because like probably Red 5 from the light side you'd be able to
or there was something where it was like a pain in the ass. So what I did is I would have Yoda on his little hut, and then every other card I had was frustrating, where it was like there's this one card called Uncontrollable Fury where you put it on Vader and it basically neutralizes him if you have a a high ability character and he doesn't fight. I would insert all these, not insert cards, because that's another thing that we ended up with later, but I would do these things like I would like cancel 4 strains, and then I would like battle them by drawing destiny, and you'd compare their power to my destiny, and all the cards I had left were high destinies. So I'd be like, all right, you got 3 stormtroopers there, so that you have power 3. I draw 3 cards. Oh, it's a 4, a 5, and a 4. So you have 3. I have 13. You lose 10 for trying to 4-strain.
So, Jeff, I'm sorry, there are too many off-roads here. I'm going to remind myself to ask you about tournament rules at the end of this.
Sure.
But what I love about Jeff, the script writers, I kind of hated in Star Wars the arbitrary limitations the thing would put on. So, for instance, Empire Strikes Back. In the very beginning, we see these droids, these drones falling down on Hoth.
The probe drones.
Uh-oh, Empire knows we're here. Later in Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader is just really, really pissed off at one of you know the guy, the character that he
Captain
chokes,
Nita,
the first one,
the captain of the Avenger.
Thank you.
Or do you mean Ozzel?
Yeah,
the one where he chokes at the beginning.
He chokes
kills
via the Force over the
guy that
over the
you're,
Zoom
you're
call.
saying the guy that played Hitler in The Last Crusade in Indiana Jones.
Oh, really? Holy cow!
Admiral Ozzel. You pulled too soon out of light speed, and then Admiral Ozzel is as clumsy as he is stupid, and he chokes him out and kills him. Right?
Awesome. Yes,
but then
because
he also kills another one in the asteroid field when they lose the Millennium Falcon.
When he says apology accepted, and then we see him die, he says apology accepted as he's walking up. And then also later we see when he's fighting Luke, they start fighting with lightsabers, and the in-story narrative I can give you is that he's just toying with Luke. And towards the end, it's like being a parent, he's like, fuck this. And he literally just starts throwing all of Cloud City at Luke, and we see he has that force power.
Yeah.
You put all those together and you go, wait a minute, why isn't Vader just sitting in front of like a security camera area with a bunch of droids? And the second they see a rebel, Vader's like, okay, I'm just going to pick up this mountain and throw it at the rebel base. They don't do that for narrative purposes. I love that you basically, when you were making the Star Wars deck, you're like, wait a minute, if I get this super Jedi on this isolated planet, why can't, and by the way, you're doing what Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi. Like, why can't this super Jedi just go around the universe, use their force powers to do stuff? I love that, Jeff. I love that so much.
In a way, I guess you could theoretically say that that's what's going. Because, yeah, like I would sense an alter and like, because, you know, Yoda was such a dominant, he was such a dominant ability. He had the ability 7, that he was basically like you couldn't really mess with him. And then there were other cards that were worth like 5 cents, like Out of Commission was this card where you could cycle basically and you would stack this destiny of 5 and you could play 5, 6 of them at a time. And you would use this, you know, you could take a card from their lost pile and place it out of play. So oftentimes this happened more than once is I would, you know, do one of these like 4-strain cancels and they would actually lose a Vader from their reserve deck. And then I would play these Out of Commissions. And then sometimes you would randomly get the Vader and so they can't play Vader for the rest of the game or something like that. And they might have 5 of them in the deck. It would really hobble people. Now that deck didn't last for too long because I'm sure I'm not the only person that thought about doing that. I loved doing.
And then I was going to say for in tournaments, what are the rules for that? Like when you come into a tournament and you make a deck like that, are there rules about what sets you play for, which things you do?
Well,
would they do that kind of stuff in tournaments?
Well, they would tell you,
or is it just, or is it a free for all?
I'd say now more there are rule sets in tournaments, whereas in this one it was if you play within the confines of the game, you're fine. Nowadays there's new rule, there's virtual sets. Some tournaments are you can only play Decipher cards. And there's more to that. But anyway, there were new personas in Cloud City. We had new personas. We had Captain Han, Princess Leia. But we also had this system called Sabak, or Sabak, however you want to pronounce it, which was like
the gambling game.
And I found ways to make Lando like Dark Side Lando become the crucial point of my entire thing and like of my entire like of the whole game. I would have that, and I would literally gamble and steal people's cards from them. It was very fun. I don't think I used to just always play Sabak, but whatever. So from Cloud City, we go to the next sets we have is Jabba's Palace. Now, Cloud City and Jabba's Palace were the biggest sets produced, they're still like dirt cheap now. Like you can still get them even though the game's been over. That's pretty cheap. You had Jabba. The focus was on aliens. You had personas that were pretty useless. You had Lando's Tamtel Screech, who was like an undercover spy. You had Princess Leia Organa, excuse me, and you had R2. You also got the Rancor, and that's all the whatever. But
That's pretty awesome.
The only thing that really stuck with Jabba's palace was the idea of a starting interrupt. You had the signal or Twi'lek advisor, meaning you could start the game with an effect out. And that changed the game in the biggest way. So
yeah, let's briefly talk. I mean, you gave the broad overview, but in terms of gameplay, there were two cards you mentioned: effect versus interrupt.
Yeah.
And from kind of a programming cycle, you have this like stage of the game where you're allowed to put characters, locations, and effects. Effects generally, unless they're mentioned otherwise, right, are permanent, right? Am I mistaken on that?
Yeah. So unless they are canceled with the alter card, or I mean, I think there are several effects that are pretty rare. When I say rare, I mean unique, not rare, like hard to find in the decks, where it would be like if a certain thing wasn't satisfied, you would lose the effect. But I can't off the top of my head even think of one.
But yeah, so like an effect example might just be like Jeff's out there, Jeff's really cool. I'm going to play an effect that, Jeff's in this, like, let's say Jeff's the boxer. I give like Jeff Jeff's an awesome boxer today, right? Like ate his Wheaties. And this is just hypothetical, not in the game. And it says, hey, Jeff is going to be a +2 boxer for the rest of the day because he ate his Wheaties, and it's got some image from the movie, right, in the Star Wars game. Like that's an example of effect. Whereas an interrupt is, while we're playing, I can play this red card that randomly just comes in out of nowhere. I can wait while you're doing something, and it has something. Yeah. And then some of the game almost turns into a duel where I might say,
yeah,
I'm going to play this interrupt that says Luke can't deploy to Dagobah because his warp shields go out. And then you're going to play a thing that says like, I cancel your interrupt. And I'm going to play a thing that says, I cancel your interrupt. And you play a thing that says,
the sense alter battles that I've seen it was really one of those things where people would put like 8 copies of each thing in their decks, like 8 senses and 8 alters, or like 8 senses and 4 alters, because they would cancel each other as well as the things that they would go for. It was really, it was annoying. Sense and alter, and there were ways that people would find to limit sense and alter, and they did put out cards where like you could grab them. There were immediate effects. There's a lot of card base to get in here, and what I don't want is for people to get like bogged down by this stuff. And because we'll talk about that in a second. We then get special edition, and special edition is the biggest set since premiere, and it is sort of coincided with the re-release of the new movies, not the prequels, but when they digitally fixed them, they called them the special editions. Now there were a couple of versions, other personas of cards. We got the earlier special edition version of Boba Fett. We got the Jabba. We got a version of Darth Vader called the Dark Lord of the Sith. We got like Commander Wedge and stuff like that. The one that people really cared the most about was Ben Kenobi. But the thing that really changed the game was now we got objectives. And objectives were a way that you start the game and it would say, okay, an objective was no longer about overpowering the person. It was about getting something done. And you would have these conditions on these cards. And when you finished it, you would literally flip the card. And the card would have, now here's your benefit. Once you were, for example, if it was like, oh, you have to occupy Jabba's palace with, only aliens, and you have to control at least 3 sites, and then flip it over, and it's like all aliens are power +3, and their 4 strains are added to whatever. Like it was a way that you would get massive benefits if you completed your objective. And they would also be like deploy several sites. So the game would start moving a little bit faster. And also it made it so that, because towards the earlier runs of the game, you would know if you were going to win or lose, right? Like it was like a pretty standard way of being like, all right, well, this person's dominating. I don't have anything. It's we know what's happening. Objectives and things like force retrieval really switched it out, where games would be a lot closer and you could flip the tide. You could turn the tide. Special edition is still to date one of the most popular sets. From there, we go to Endor.
I've got a comment on special edition, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm still laughing that as a whole, this game is programming. Jeff's a programmer. I'm sorry. And that this is like corporate speak. You're like, here's what we're adding. We're going to add your key performance indicators and add objectives. So
I think you just want
from a
this
meta
to be like programming.
From a meta, it is. I'm sorry, Jeff. From a meta perspective, you're like as you are describing, sticking with the Star Wars customizable card game. I'm like, this is a meta version of being like tricked into being a software developer and like meeting your performance reviews. I do want to take.
I'm going to say that's a stretch.
It's not. It is not even a stretch, and I wish I had more time. This is on the cusp of being a blog post at nerdnumbers.substack.com, but I'm already way behind on that because I've had other stuff. But also, what I was going to say, Jeff, I want to take a brief off ramp to talk something I realized we hadn't from a collecting standpoint, and I know this is going to come up soon. The concept of different rarities, and this actually has shown up. For instance, you and Adam Todd Brown in unboxing on You Don't Even Like Sports cards on the Unpopular Opinion Network. You know, you get a deck of cards. Everybody's familiar with this. I get a playing pack of any type of card. Baseball, basketball, Marvel trading cards, Star Wars customizable. I go through it. There are a lot of cards that are just common, that are just going to show up a lot. So for Star Wars customizable card game, I believe they had 1 and 2 for each. Was it for each? There's common, uncommon, rare. That's how it starts. And I believe there was 1 and 2 for each. So that was just the number of cards you could expect to see.
So in like a premiere set, I think it was like you had like 9 or 10 commons. You had 1 rare in every pack, 10 commons or whatever, and then the rest it was like more commons and then a couple of uncommons. Yeah,
because I think it was what 15 per pack, right? I think was the number.
But then but then there were also like rare 1s and rare 2s where it was like a lot easier to get a shitty rare than it was to get like a Vader. We moved to Endor, and that's a very popular set now. It was very short printed. You had versions of Chewbacca. You had a version of Leia that was going to allow her to do Jedi tests. You had General Solo. You had Ewoks. It's become much more popular now than it was back in the day. The cards are people really like those. But then we move to what are considered like the top tier of this card set, which is first off, Reflections. A pack of Reflections cards now costs about $150 as of recording. Reflections was a smattering of cards from previous sets. Usually you got your Cloud Cities, your Jabba Palace, your Jabba's Palaces, maybe some Dagobah stuff. I actually pulled the White Border Executor from a Reflections pack. So it was like Dagobah revised, and I pulled because you could get rares. It was all random. It was just like middle print runs. They would put cards in these packs of Reflections. You'd get some unlimited premiere, and then you'd get 1 foil card. And a foil card.
Can I ask from how this was built? Was this built almost around the like maybe they had like a bunch of old inventory that like this is just how to repackage it and get it out? Or was it just a clever idea they did?
Because if you look at what sets they put in there, Unlimited, Cloud City, and Jabba's Palace were in every pack of Reflections because those were the ones that they just had tons of. So they were like, it was like a dumping ground for cards while offering the incentive of these foil cards, which are, some people played with foil cards, but they were the more collectible things. And there were 2 ultra rares. They had different levels of rarity. You had your Darth Vader and your Luke Skywalker. They were basically reprints with a foil on them. They're pretty popular now because people like to collect. Back then, Reflections was met with mixed reviews. The prices were a little bit higher, and these were for cards that you may have already had. If you pulled like a shitty foil, a card like Slip Sliding Away, which was like a Cloud City interrupt that sucked that nobody used, and you pull that as a foil, you're like, I just wasted $5. But Reflections gave us the first ultra rare things, which are those 2 foils, which we're then going to use in Death Star 2. Death Star 2 is considered by most to be the best expansion ever. It introduced 2 ultra rares in Jedi Luke and Palpatine. We got the sort of third and final print Vader with Lord Vader, who was a little bit stronger. We were given new forms of cards called Admiral's Orders, which were to increase space. And the Death Star 2 there were 2 parts of Death Star 2. There were, let's bring back space battles in a big way. So they did that. They inspired a lot more, dogfighting and there were more Star Destroyers and more special TIE fighters and X-Wings and stuff and Mon Calamari Star Cruisers. And then you had that, and then you had the objectives of literally turning Luke or Vader to the other side. Those were the big things. Another interesting thing about this set is you could only get 2 characters in a fixed starter deck. So it used to be you'd get a starter deck and it would be like, oh, here's 60 cards, with a rare in it. Good luck. With this one, you would get a dark side or a light side starter deck. And it would give you a fixed set of cards that you could buy these 2 starter decks and immediately play your friends. And in those starter decks, they actually included reprints of the General Solo and Chewbacca of Kashyyyk. You could get those fixed. So if you couldn't afford the rare version of them from Endor, you could pay $9.99 and you could get them in there, as well as in either the dark side or the light side, you would get Admiral Piet or Admiral Akbar. You could only get those 2 characters.
Related to the Admiral's Orders, as you were mentioning.
Yeah. You could only get those cards in the Death Star 2 starter decks. So it was like a real good incentive. That was brilliant on Decipher's part, by the way, to make such an important card exclusive to those.
It's fascinating here, and because I'm reading the script and seeing where it's going, Jeff. It's like watching Titanic and going like, wait a minute, we're at minute 90 here, and Billy Zane's getting that crazy look in his eyes, and it's kind of sad because if we're looking at this right,
yeah,
Star Wars CCG starts really strong, kind of meanders a little in the middle, is figuring it out. It sounds like it's starting to find its footing. And then it's about to, we'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah. So
I did want to, from a collectible standpoint, want to throw something really fascinating about this time in Star Wars CCG out.
Yeah.
Endor in particular. If I go and look for a foil Wicket, which was really appealing to me, we talked about because of the Ewok movies, I really like that. Not that expensive. If I want to get a pack of Endor cards because these are out of print, we have now reached the point where the boxes and packs of cards unopened are more valuable. Like if I wanted to go buy a set of Endor cards complete, I could probably do that for a couple $100, depending on level I wanted of the rares, etc. How nice and graded or whatever. If I was like, I want to get 60 packs for Jeff and I to open, first off, that would be prohibitively expensive. And also, if we did it, like there's a possibility you live near enough collectors out where you are. They're like, someone might I might hear someone running at your door. There might be someone from your comics. I was like, how dare you? You can't open all those packs. So it is wild to get to the point where the unopened pack is now more valuable than the cards inside of the pack.
We'll put it this way. I was doing my comedy show Mint on Card at Blast from the Past, and they had a pack of Endor there. Somebody had sold it, and they wanted $3 for it. And I grabbed it. I was like, I'll take it. And I opened it. And it had AT-ST cannons, and people were like, and that's a great card now. And I went onto the Facebook group because there's a great Star Wars CCG Facebook group. And I was like, look what I pulled out of a thing. And they were like, why did you open that? Sealed product is highly collectible. Because people are collecting these cards, right? Because most people aren't necessarily even playing in real life. They're playing online on a thing called GEMP, which we could discuss in a bit. So, the sealed product is the collectible itself, but also sealed product is Schrodinger's rare. Like it is, we have spoiler alert. I have 2 packs of limited premiere that you sent me. Right now, there might be a Vader in it. Right now, there might be a Darth Vader in there. When I open it, it's probably like a Mahdi Seeker. or something, like
So yeah, here's what's rough about those. Like, also, you and Adam Todd Brown mentioned something I'm really curious because this sounds like a generic term, but you said like pack search. So you spoiler alert, join the Unpopular Opinion Patreon tier, join the Jeff May Patreon tier if you want behind the scenes pack breaking. It's amazing. It's so much fun. You guys were doing Donruss. What's the year for Ken Griffey
we did 89. Yeah.
Jr.? Sorry, you did 89. You all pulled a Ken Griffey Jr. card, and you didn't beat up Adam pulled it. Spoiler alert!
Yeah.
And you didn't like lunge across the table, punch him in the mouth where it still hurts, and steal it because you're a great friend.
I wouldn't do
That
that.
was an amazing find. But you were talking about like pack searching, like that you bought these packs from someone. But is there a way where if I bought a box of like Premiere, like a sealed box,
No.
could I open that box
They're not
and
sealed.
somehow?
They're not sealed with wax. So I mean,
So that was the implication for that. So you were saying basically someone literally unwaxing the wax of these older
people used
baseball
to do that.
cards,
Yeah.
looking through them and do that, and then repackage them and sell
Yeah.
junk or make it look legitimate. At one point, I did this to a friend as a gift. My arts and craft thing. I took a Star Wars Hoth of all things, and whatever the admiral that actually destroys the shield. That was
that
the
would
rare.
be, it's actually General Veers.
General Veers. I gave him a General Veers. So I actually resealed a hot set. I like opened up the pack, used some super glue to reseal it, and put like 4 nice rares in there. And that was one of them that I thought was really cool. And he
General
was like, yeah, I
Veers,
thought it was really.
I believe his Japanese card, like the card from Japan of General Veers, is the most valuable base card that exists.
Wow,
in
because
Star
Hoth
Wars
was
game.
really rare in Japan. Yeah,
But
exactly
yeah,
what
the
you're saying,
pop
'cause
is
they had
really
printing in other countries.
Yeah, and it's like really hard to get. Apparently, dark side rares are like almost impossible to find. I know some people from the Star Wars CCG Facebook group are listening to this right now. I might be not giving fully correct information right now. I think I am, but if they are angry at me for that, I do apologize that I didn't pay attention and realize that like meteor impact is more valuable or something like that. But I know people go crazy for the Japanese Veers. Now,
And to your point on Schrodinger's rares, though, exactly what you were saying, and then I'll give the output. Like those 2 packs, right? About $15 a pack, not bad. We're breaking those, but I could definitely see, right, like these reflections, these foil packs that are 100, 150, and they're never going to be produced again. Those I completely understand the trepidation of being like, you can't open this pack, and that gets really weird. And pulling a Hoth for $3 and opening, like, I think the fact that you got it for $3 helps a lot, but like that was an amazing find to get it for $3 to begin with.
oh, the
And
Endor
yeah,
pack.
I gotta say the Endor pack, sorry, and then opening it makes complete sense.
It's one of those things where there's this guy that I follow or I don't on YouTube and he's Egar Chow 89 CCGs and more is his so is like his thing, and he does this thing where he opens random Star Wars card booster packs because he has a store and he sells them, and every once in a while he'll like he has this system of like randomly opening packs of cards and you get to see, and it's fascinating to me that he because he sells these sealed things, but he also opens a couple, and sometimes he opens $150 pack of reflections cards or whatever.
Holy cow.
It's crazy. It's one of those
speaking
things.
of which go ahead.
Good.
I was just going to say, speaking of which, I think, yeah, the next set was, right, Reflections 2, or we were finishing that up.
Reflections 2 was a way to sort of allow people to have access to characters that Death Star 2 didn't allow. So you got slightly worse versions of a Jedi Luke. You had Luke Skywalker Rebel Scout, and you had the Emperor, and they were like slightly nerfed versions of the ultra rares. You also got introduced to Shadows of the Empire. Like you had extended universe characters. You had your Shadows of the Empire characters, some of the Zahn characters, etc. Now there are characters, because we're going to go, that there are supplemental things that were sold as well, and we're going to talk about that. But then I'm just going to get through the base sets. And you also had more reflections cards, and surprise, the ultra rare Reflections 2 foils are Luke Skywalker and the Emperor. We get into episode 1 and we get as far as sets go, it's not particularly strong. The biggest thing that it does is it allows us to have more high ability characters. More Jedi are being produced. You get Darth Maul, you get Darth Sidious once we hit Theed Palace. You have Tatooine, Coruscant, and Theed Palace. These are your episode 1 groups. Tatooine added pod racing. It's a whole thing. It's not great. You got Qui-Gon.
Sorry, Jeff. I got to read this and throw out some expansion stuff.
Yeah.
This is in our script or our little.
You want to read what I wrote in the script last night?
I'm reading it. Sorry, I'm going behind the curtain, Jeff. I apologize. We can cut it if you don't want it on air. But you said pod racing. It's a whole ass thing. I'm high and I don't feel like discussing this mediocre set. And I'm throwing this out there because this will be released in time for this. The Jeff Has Cool Friends brand has been going for 2 years. You're doing awesome. You're doing great. It's amazing. So proud of you. All of your fans love you. Too many of us love you because, as you keep noting on your show, you have too many producers to the point where your guests are like, how many fucking people are you going to shout out, Jeff?
Yeah.
How much do you charge? And so that spoiler alert, that will be going up. You're going to be doing some rebranding. And one thing I like to do, as you know, other behind the curtain thing is I like throwing ideas at you. And my 2 cents, Patreon is fantastic because if you open up a Patreon tier to say, please give me money to do this, and you get crickets, it didn't cost you. You didn't spend any shelf space. You didn't do anything. You didn't lose anything. It spent you 10 minutes to click it. But if people bite, then holy cow, suddenly that's making money. So one thing I've thrown out as like a possible Patreon tier at some point in the future, and like let us know in the comments if this does it, is like, hi, Jeff explains something. As an example, on the Gamefully Unemployed, you'll show up on like movie nights and you'll be like, hi, and you'll say it. A lot of the hosts will be high on that. And you'll be watching some bad movie, and then you all are hilarious as high, you're explaining like some high concept thing. So one of my biggest regrets in this show is we did the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out episode, one of my favorites. You're an amazing boxer and know all this stuff. And on that episode, you like texted me the night before and are like, hey, I saw your script. Really sorry, I am way too high to give my thoughts on this show or on this on Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And I wish I'd come back and be like, dear God, Jeff, write whatever the hell you want. This is going to be comedic gold. And I'll say for fans of Jeff May on the patreon.com, Jeff May, tiers for whatever, throw out if you'd like, maybe high. That was an idea I had off the cuff of my head last night. And I think it'd be funny to have hi, Jeff, like throw that out. Someone should pay money and say, Jeff, get high and explain pod racing in the Tatooine set of the Star Wars CCG.
Now, Tatooine, what its main thing did is we had more active Jedi Masters for the light side. You had your Qui-Gons and whatever. But they also did alternate image characters. So you had there was a Padme, but there was the Padme alternate image. And then there was a Qui-Gon and then the Qui-Gon alternate image. And they ended up doing that for the remainder of this set, of this run of having AI. That means alternate image, not the other version of AI. AI cards that would come out and they would be, shorter printed and more valuable. Again, it's the collectability aspect of it, which is fine. So that's, it's not particularly great. You got Maul, you got Padme, you got Qui-Gon, whatever. We end up getting, Coruscant comes in. That's a very short print run. Also, their big push was politics as a battleground, the Senate, and it was kind of lame. You had the sort of the
question on that though too, to follow up, because what we're staring at the iceberg, Jeff, on the script. I feel so bad, and you were upset about the iceberg that's coming up, which is Lucasfilm's killing it. My understanding was that Lucasfilms came in and basically said, you've got this great set running. To your point, on Death Star 2, it seems like they found their footing. They found the way to make this game enjoyable.
I think they found their footing a while ago. You got to remember, you got to remember, this was the number 2 card game the entire time it existed. No other card game other than Magic the Gathering was above it.
I guess whatever phrase you want to use, found their stride. Because I'm just going off the notes where you're like, Death Star 2 is thought of as like the best run.
Yeah.
So I'm basically saying we see Star Wars CCG, not in terms of popularity, just in terms of like how they're putting out a deck, how they're constructing stuff. Death Star 2 comes out. They seem to have found their stride. You can even argue, as we're talking about reflections packs, this is a great way to deal with keeping people invested in old sets, repurposing product, right? Some product manager got a pay raise for like, we've got all of this unused inventory. We're going to have to sell these Cloud City decks at a loss. And they're like, hey, what if we do this? And like, oh my God, you've just made us money. That's brilliant. So they found their footing. And I believe what I've read from like cursory Wikipedia and stuff is that Lucasfilms came in and said, we really, really want you to tie the CCG in with the prequels.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
right after they've kind of like tied into the extended universe and stuff going great, as we even noted, Reflection 2 has some of the extended universe included, which
Corin
many of us
Horn or
loved.
Dash Rendar. Yeah. Shizor.
Oh, that's amazing. Love it. It'd be fun to just like have you keep running up. They interrupt that to basically say, and now we're going to talk about the prequels, which are notoriously, lambasted by fans at this point.
Well, yeah, but you got to remember though the prequels, like the lambasting that episode 1, it wasn't as strong. Like, yeah, people were mad at it, but it wasn't like the vitriol that it got a couple years later. Like it took a while. Like there was shock. The first time I saw Phantom Menace, I was like, yeah, that was all right. Like I was blown away by the effects and stuff like that. But beyond that, what Tatooine, Coruscant, and Theed Palace do is that they change like now like the timeline thing, where you can have Qui-Gon versus Darth Vader, and that makes it weird because before that it used to be like, oh, I have Darth Vader versus 22 Jawas. That's funny and weird, but now it's like getting into like Back to the Future stuff, and they had different persona rules. Like Anakin and Darth Vader are different characters. They're different, so like they're not personas of the same thing. You could at one point in time have Emperor Palpatine and Sidious and what's his name there, Senator Palpatine from the light side. You could have all three of those characters out at the same time and there was no conflict. That got weird. Coruscant did politics. There, the cards that really came out of there was you had Darth Maul, Young Apprentice, Destroyer Droids. They also did a Jedi Council thing where if you had these very valuable Jedi, but you had to put them in the Jedi Council for them to really, really matter. Then you had Theed Palace. It was sort of like the grass version of Hoth. It was sort of the finish up. You had, your General Jar Jars, your Boss Nasses, whatever. And we also had right around the same time, Halloween of 2001, we had Reflections 3. And Reflections 3 is, stop me if I'm wrong, the most expensive thing to buy is a pack of Reflections 3. I think that's the absolute top tier. There were unique premium cards that you would get in there along with the foils. You had these upkeep characters. There were also these things you could get called defensive shields, which are my least favorite part of the entire game. It was basically like you would create a sideboard of cards that would cancel out you could have 15 of them or something like that, or 10 of them, and you could use them to cancel out people's plans. I hated it. I hated defensive shields, but whatever. Okay. Now, while this was all going on, you occasionally had other things being released. Now, another interesting thing that they ended up doing in between certain sets, like between Special Edition and Endor, they released what was called Enhanced Premiere. And that was these things where you would get packs of cards. It was like a little cardboard box. You get packs of cards and then one fixed premium card that was usually, I think it was all different characters, like with their weapons. You'd have like Obi-Wan with lightsaber, Luke with lightsaber, Darth Vader with lightsaber, Leia with blaster rifle, I think Boba Fett with blaster rifle, Han with blaster pistol, right? So you would essentially get these characters that were maybe not as strong as the individual cards that they would represent, but they might not have had, like, they didn't have immunity to attrition, but they had a lightsaber built in. So you could show up and just ruin people. The one that people really kind of pulled out of that was like the card that went into everyone's decks was the Han Solo with blaster pistol. It was a great card. We did the same thing with Enhanced Cloud City and Enhanced Jabba's Palace. Jabba's Palace actually gave us something that we were not expecting, which was Mara Jade.
Oh, nice.
And Mara Jade became one of the, because what, you had sort of more.
For those that don't know, Mara Jade is like a secret apprentice, if I get this right, to Palpatine behind Darth Vader's back.
Yep, an
occasional love interest to Luke, depending on where it goes in the EU.
Yeah, his future wife, right?
Oh yeah, does that? Some of this gets funny where, like, depending on how far on the story I got, with the thing. But yeah, so I mean, just in terms of EU royalty, one of the kind of you could almost call like Harley Quinn of the spin-off character that at that
Yep.
point gets big. And if Lucasfilms knew what they were doing, maybe would have capitalized and given us something other. But we got Jar Jar. So anyway, proceed.
So the interesting part, though, is that from a production standpoint, you'll notice the 3 sets that came enhanced with packs in there. Premiere,
Or the
Cloud City, and Jabba's Palace. The 3 that were overproduced. They were like, we've got so much of this crap. We need to get rid of it. What do we do? Offer them 1 unique card or whatever, or, and then give them 3 packs of the crap that we can't sell. And that's what they did.
That's fine. I mean, the reboxing old con. I mean, that's something we're talking about. Like
That's
Patreon says that's classic business, and it's. I mean, what's really funny is the exclusion of this of this stuff of these 3 sets is like pod racing and Senate battles. People are like, "What the hell is this?" But from a business perspective, rule perspective, etc., it really does sound like they know what is going on. You've got a Theed Palace mentioned here, so I'm curious. Anything from there you want to reference?
That's where we got Darth Sidious and your General Jar Jar. It was very much, I always considered that to be the Hoth set of episode 1. Again, it was as the game was dying, it wasn't as highly produced, I guess. Maybe it wasn't as popular as it went through, but it did constantly evolve. Now, so there were other supplements that came out. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't mention. There were these anthologies that would come out where you would get, preview cards and things. There were these things called sealed decks where you get unique cards. It was what it was. There's a lot of stuff. And I feel like I didn't want to go too much. It's hard for me to pare down what I'm talking about on this because this is such an important thing to me. I mean, if you look right behind me over my shoulder, you'll see an introductory 2-player Premiere game. That's my box that I first bought in 1995 that I still have. And inside of it, I have a large amount of rare, valuable cards that I still have that are now placed in plastic. So I use this spot as sort of a holder for my Star Wars cards still.
That's really cool. I want to talk the death because this, like I said, this is definitely fascinating. You've got this in all caps, killed by Lucasfilm when they went to fucking WOTC, which I know what that stands for. It's your call if you want to call them out. This game fucking sucked. It used dice. Fuck you. You're a card game. It bombed. It's fucking Face Off from 2002 to 2005. Those are Jeff's comments. Apologies to cheat and just use the script direct, Jeff, but that is the end of the official Decipher run of Star Wars CCG. And, if you're a Star Wars fan at that time, right, the Lucasfilm, kind of what they decided to do with the prequels, the characters they decided to back. Like I said, the funny pre-post of this is 1995 is post-fan hype, and kind of 2001, 2002, where George Lucas kind of has a full range. You're like, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, it's a bummer. Yeah, there was a big backlash against Lucasfilm over this move. And some people were like, I'm going to give it a shot. And some people were like, screw this. Decipher also did kind of screw up a little bit because they released 2 other Star Wars CCGs concurrently. That one was designed for younger age kids called Young Jedi. And there was another one called Jedi Knights. And they both bombed. And that's going to be another example of again, I don't work for Decipher. I don't know what their budget was like. And sometimes I know those guys are on the forums, are on the Star Wars CCG forums and the Facebook group, and they will talk very candidly about stuff. And we've had 20 years of post-cancellation evolution of this game because the Players Committee, which you can literally check out at starwarsccg.org, that's still a thing. And you can check that out right now, and you can see all the different virtual sets that they make and continue to make. And that's one of the things about this game that is unbelievable. This game, the players did not accept its death, and they kept it going. They are very smart about making sure that they're not making a profit off of this, because if you profit from this, you'll be destroyed. No, what they do is, so that's why you'll notice it's starwarsccg.org. They don't use, so like you can get Poe Dameron cards for this game. Like they made them. They did not use Oscar Isaac stills from the movies. They had a cosplayer or what, like whatever, do that. Like they make sure that they're not violating specific copyrights while they're doing these things. They're very smart about it.
There's an interesting dichotomy of this, because I think Star Wars fans, something you've notoriously talked about with Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi, is the worst types of fandom.
As of our current release, Ninja Turtles fans aren't doing too well for themselves right now, as far as like what we saw with the backlash against April O'Neil.
Seth Rogen made Ninja Turtles movie. I'm super psyched, and I understand. But okay, so Star Wars CCG, the committee, being kind of these fans that take ownership of an IP and do it in a way that is positive. That is a nice supplement to what we normally see, which is fans taking ownership of an IP, becoming too attached to it, and then getting toxic. The Snyder Bros. Yeah. So that's what I want to say is it's the light side of the Force, because where it gets really fascinating on the dark side of the Force is basically taking ownership and really what you could argue overstepping your bounds. It's not your IP.
But here's what I'm going to say, and I apologize if any of you are, parts of the players committee that are listening. I know you guys know that I'm making this podcast because we talked about it on the forums, on the Facebook page. I keep saying forums like it's 2003.
I was on a Star Wars CCG forum. That was one of my first things. And I'll throw out Terry Gamel, awesome person who helped. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about Hope. It might be Gamel. I do not know the pronunciation, Jeff. Yeah. All in print. Anyway,
there's a guy locally, this guy Anthony Howard, who comes to almost every mint on card. And I met him because I went onto the Facebook page and was like, if any of you come to my show in Burbank and you can pick one of these cards and take it. And they were like pretty valuable cards, like Qui-Gon with lightsaber and stuff. And he did, and he's been coming ever since. He's great. But anyway, there is a very positive fandom for this card game. That is not to say that everybody playing this card game still doesn't exhibit certain toxic beliefs about the sequel trilogy. A lot of people do still take it seriously that play this game, where they're, you'll see like, oh, we've got the new, Rey Palpatine card or what, and people would be like, oh, I hate that. They'll be like, I'm glad I have this card, but they still hate the property. So it's not to say that there still aren't toxic fans in this fan base. It's just to say that the community behind this card game is really stoked that we're still doing this.
Well, that's where it gets interesting, is the weird part about being a fan is you don't own the thing you're a fan of.
You do not own the thing that you are a fan of. I just wanted to tell that to the people listening.
Because it is a really hard thing is, I can get upset on properties I like, doing things that I think are bad decisions, but it's not mine. And I mean, the corporate America rules are very frustrating, where, some big IP buys up all this stuff, and it sucks that Disney owns everything and they're allowed to do whatever the hell they want with Iron Man, right? If tomorrow they want to erase Robert Downey Jr. entirely and replace him with a chipmunk, they're allowed to do that. They own the property. I can be a fan. And also the last part, I think we've said this before on the show, but it is just a topic worth reiterating. A new version of a property you love does not erase the old version. I'm going to give a huge shout out. I don't want to mess up the name, but Nick, Game Gear I feel so bad that I'm just like, Game Gear.
Nicholas Cowan.
Nicholas Cowan, amazing guest, who my brain is like, that's Game Gear from Surf Ninja, which
that's
I know
Adam
is like
from
rude.
Surf Ninjas, yeah.
But he's on. Nope, not Adam.
Game Gear call him Game Gear, yeah.
But amazing guest. Definitely listen to that. Jeff Has Cool Friends. If you haven't, it will be out for free when this releases, but you should listen to the bonus content. It's amazing stuff. But, just talking about just because you love something when you were young and a new version of it comes out, that does not erase it. The horrible new Indiana Jones movies do not erase, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like that's still there. You can still enjoy
I
it.
say
Your
Last
memories
Crusade
of-
because that's the better of them all.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I'd definitely give you Last Crusade, Sean Connery for sure. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's the only point is going this weird toxic fandom of I love this, I have this, it's never allowed to change. It's like, no, you don't own it, and it changing doesn't erase the thing you have now. The only thing that ironically like steals your childhood is, when big conglomerations that own all the rights erase things from existing everywhere and you're not allowed to re-get them. So if you want to get mad at George Lucas from not like releasing some of the older versions, replacing
Yeah.
with the new prints, with
Going
Disney Plus
special
for not-
edition heavy, yeah.
yeah, with Disney Plus not giving you access, that is absolutely fair. But a new version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a new version of Star Wars does not erase the original trilogy. And I think
Yes.
that is an important PSA
Yeah.
to, as you're saying, some of the fan
Definite-
base that would be listening here.
Definitely. And like toxic fans are everywhere, even in a great fan base. But beyond that, we're past that at this point in time. The Players Committee does a very good job of doing this. And again, it's a nonprofit. This is all free. You can download these digital cards for free. They do say like, hey, if you guys want to donate, we sure could use it. And people do, and they offer incentives for that. And so this is a huge nod to this fan base and this community that keeps this game going for over 20 years. And that is, to me, that's so important. This is a card game that really this was the thing that I did as a teenager. And I mean, we can talk about it, but like even in college, I was 19 years old training for the Golden Gloves in Western Massachusetts. I would leave boxing training to go to tournaments in the Dragon's Lair at West Springfield in Massachusetts, right? I would go literally like right from boxing practice, I would shower and then I would go play these tournaments. I played religiously for a long time and I was really good. I was really good because I really enjoyed thinking outside of the box in how to play these games. And that was, I couldn't afford all the pricier cards. So what do you do if you can't afford all the pricier cards? Find a way to make the cheap cards work for you. And that's what I did. And it was a lot of fun. I would win tournaments with really cheap decks. And I would always try, there's one deck I always tried that I could never make work was a Jawa deck. And I've been very close. And I've won with the Jawa deck in the past, but I could never. It's a lot about like manipulating what other people have and kind of like stealing their force a little bit and using I always just wanted to win with cheap cards and make people realize that it wasn't about how much money they spent on the game.
I am so psyched and sad for future Dre because I really want to do a Jeff May, Billy Bean of Star Wars CCG cut for the Jeff May YouTube channel.
Yeah, there's like it's funny because there were times like my brothers and I all played and my best friend at the time, Vinny, he and I played all the time. And like we would go to these tournaments and sometimes like we had friends that never even played the game that would come. So I would show up with like a group, like a gang of dudes showing up and like really like bro energy in these places that were like very nerdy. And we would come and just really bro out. And we thought it was really funny to do that. Like we thought it was really funny to sort of bring that bro energy to something as nerdy as Star Wars.
Jeff, you know enough nerd. I'm sorry to, you know me. Every time I talk to you, I'm like, here are 3 more project ideas. A hilarious skit would literally be like Boston Bro plays Magic.
Dude, that's literally what we did.
You did it for real.
It's funny when you show up because people do judge how people look. And so I would show up like literally wearing like a white A shirt, a colloquially referred to as a wife beater. I would wear like just like a dirt bag pair of shorts and a wife beater. And like, remember I was boxing at the time. I looked like a meathead and I would come in, but I was a huge nerd. So they would expect that they were going to murder me in this game and I would just obliterate them. And it wasn't just obliterating them with better cards. It was, this is my hobby. This is what I like to do. And I like to think a lot about it. So I would do stuff like I would come home and my brother would be like, hey, let's play real quick. I made a new deck. And it was just like he made one location with 59 stormtroopers. And that was the whole thing. And he was just like, wasn't that funny? And I looked at it, I was like, yes. And then I looked at it for a second. I was like, I can win with this. if I switch out a couple cards. And he's like, what? And so we did it where we ended up there were certain card combinations where stormtroopers are like the bottom of the barrel cards. They're power 1, ability 1. They're just chaff, right? They also deploy free to a location with a dark Jedi, like Darth Vader, right? So I was like, if we put Darth Vader here, we can then put 25 stormtroopers on him. There are cards that modify a stormtrooper's power. Trooper assault. All your stormtroopers are power +2 and immune to attrition, right? And then there were cards where I could keep modifying it. There's a card, Dark Jedi Presence. All of your other Imperials with a Dark Jedi are double their power. So right there, somebody initiates a battle against me, and I just have like Vader and a couple stormtroopers, right? And then I can have reacts where I can deploy more stormtroopers. And then I can say, there's this card, you overestimate their chances. If opponent initiate a battle, triple the damage of the eventual loser. So whatever the battle damage is, it's tripled. And then you would play, all right, now I'm going to play Trooper Assault. So now my stormtroopers are power 3 each. Oh, now I'm going to play Dark Jedi Presence. So now I had like 15 or 20 stormtroopers that were basically roided out to be Darth Vader's power. They were all power 6, immune to attrition. So I would clearly win this battle. And then it would triple the damage. So we ended up winning a battle. I think it was by like 130. And it was like
and a deck is 60. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So it was just one of those things where just you would lull this person into attacking you, thinking that they had you, and then you would just obliterate them with like cards. You know, the Vader would be worth something, but every other card was either a common, uncommon, or like a rare that nobody cared about, like Dark Jedi Presence.
Rare too, yeah.
Yeah. So it was like one of those things where you'd essentially like prank win. And that to me was like the best way to play. Or playing Sabak. So like if somebody's trying to like they have their whole thing here, and the prank is that I'm a gambling addict and I have to play blackjack in the middle of this game the whole time. And I had Lando protected in certain areas so I could win, and I would win other people's like starships. So you could win shit like you could win certain versions of Sabak, you could win weapons. To be like, all right, well, I guess I own Vader's lightsaber now. Or like, oh, I guess I own this TIE fighter.
Are you talking in game or like for real?
In game,
for real,
like
I was going to say for real, I'd be like,
that.
nah, I wouldn't play with those rules. But yeah, that's awesome.
But it was very funny. Like that to me was the best. Like, can I win funny? And that was like the thing where it's like some guy who's got like he's investing all this money in these cards, and then a guy beats him up with stormtroopers. Like that is undeniably hilarious. Now, I don't know what rules exist now in the game because I just haven't had time to play. I would love to play on GEMP and put it back together. I don't know if you knew this about me, but I work a lot. It's hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually curious about two things related to that. What was, I mean, it's different. Tournaments are a weird thing in general with anything, right?
Yeah.
Tournaments, it's not like a boxer where one-on-one, because a tournament you can be great and, fall out early.
My brother was the #1 player in the Kashyyyk region with that stormtrooper deck because it was so funny, right? He was the #1 player. He won with a differential that was out of control. This was right when Death Star 2 came out. So he shows up and he's playing a guy who was the actual #1 player. So for like a split second during the Kashyyyk regionals, which was at the Boxborough Holiday Inn, he was the best player in the region until he played the actual best player in the region with like another deck. And the guy, like, he's like, yeah, he immediately like took my Luke and converted him to the dark side with all these cards I barely had known. Because like Death Star 2 had come out like 3 or 4 days before. And all these guys were buying boxes and boxes of this stuff. And we were just dirtbag college kids. But we didn't have money for this. But it was just very fun. Like, but that's also really funny. Like that to me, like all of my favorite Star Wars CCG stories are funny. And that to me is the best part of it.
So okay, so interesting. It sounds like, and you were saying you got that idea from the deck. So were you kind of like your brother's like corner man, like
Well, we
definitely
were
help?
each playing in the thing. So he would be like, all right, I'm going to do this deck. And I was like, okay, well, I need these cards because we kind of pooled our cards together. And so I would make sure I'd be like, okay, well, he thought it would be funny, like, oh, I'm just going to do like the big Stormtrooper deck. I'm like, no, let me give you a winning deck. Let me make a winning deck here and I'll do this. There was one deck I did, it was a Dark Side Musicians deck that was a dominant. It was just like evil alien musicians. I loved gambling decks. I loved doing decks where it was going to mess with you and you didn't know what to do because nobody would be stupid enough to play this deck. And that's my thing. Doing a Jawa deck. That's still like my favorite thing to do. And finding ways to have just imagine if you're Darth Vader and all of a sudden 15 Jawas with weapons are staring you down and they kill him. Think about that in a movie of having 15 Jawas murdering Darth Vader. That's the funniest shit I could possibly imagine. That's why I would always want to make those specific decks. Like,
Well, anyway, and I was going to say, just
go ahead.
from the Oakland A's comparable, like you're the Paul DePodesta, it sounds like, of this team. You're like the assistant GM, the nerd behind the GM. Your brother did great. I assume were you highly ranked as well, or was it just he was
I
competing more than you?
was at one point in time, but I didn't. It was up and down. I think the best I ever had been was I maybe touched the top 50 at one point in time. But again, that's not that much of it. You know, there were these guys, you know, you'd see names that I would see every year and be like, oh, I hope I never have to play that guy. And I was also young. Like I was young and it was a hobby for me. It was something that I really liked, but it was also like more of a bonding experience with my brothers and my friends. Like we loved playing this game together and we loved shooting the shit and like pranking the concept of the game was very funny to us. And can we win? Can we eke out a win being assholes? Not like in a rude way, but just being fucking goofy.
At the meta level nerd stuff we've talked, I really love. You know, we almost had. I'm not opposing you because I'm not invested enough in Star Wars CCG to have a contrasting view. But when, for instance, we were talking video games, and I'm like, oh yeah, here's the funny way that you break Mega Man 2 or Zelda 2, and this, you're like, that's cheating. That's not how you play the game. And then you taking the opposing view in Star Wars CCG, I just love.
I'm not glitching though. I'm not glitching. That's fair, but I'm finding loophole. What it is I'm not finding loopholes. I'm finding creative solutions. I guess is the way I'm not so diplomatic
I'm
with
still
explaining the difference. Yeah.
And I gotta give a shout out to my friend Landon Rickster GT. We actually played some Super Metroid last night, and we did actually have a fun discussion of like in Super Metroid if certain things qualify as a glitch or like a trick, like you can affect your velocity when you're in ball form, that kind of stuff. So I just enjoy this and nerd discussions. The like, is this cheating? Is this allowed? What are the rules? I think you and I both, in all forms of our nerddom we are seeing, do enjoy looking at the borders, looking at the boundaries, and being like, huh,
You know what
how strong are those?
you know what I think is actually cheating in games like this? Money decks. I think cheating is in a tournament, in a regional tournament that starts a week after Death Star 2 is released, somebody with 3 copies of Palpatine and Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight and everything they want to be able to dominate under a new rule set that other people aren't prepared for. That is a much cheaper way to win than somebody who's clever enough to figure out how to win with a deck filled with 34 stormtroopers.
Also, ironically, back in those days, there's kind of a almost real world sports comparable there, which is that person in that region, if they have all those cards that you're saying, they might have just actually bought at all the stores. So it could even be the case that you don't have the money to buy a full box, but
Yep.
you want to go to your local comic book store and buy a couple Death Star 2s to have a chance at a Palpatine, and they're sold out because someone with all the money. So I would actually agree with you. And I mean, my thinking, and I'm not sure on like tournaments, is it seems like you'd almost want to do restrictions and stuff. But I'm not sure of what
Yeah,
that
but
does.
that's also unfair. It's what it is again, it's not necessarily cheating. It was just cheap. like that year, the Kashyyyk regionals, the winners, so like the regional champion was 2 Death Star 2 themed decks, where it was the guy just had all the most powerful cards that you couldn't compete with, and cards that were designed to break down other things. Now, is it wrong that they did that? No, they used what they had within the confines of the system. They had more money to buy these things. This was what they did. What I'm saying is I don't respect them.
I agree with
Like,
that.
I didn't respect people that won that way. I did not agree with, it's not that I agreed with what they did. I just am like, congratulations, you had more money than me. I think harder than you at this game. And that's why I never respected the quote mains and toys style of winning. I always did everything I could to be like, how can I make a deck dominate with, without using, a main character or something like that. To me is such a more fun thing. And as the sets started to develop, I think that happened more often than not. People were like hiding in asteroids and Jedi testing and stuff like that. And that was fun. But, it was stuff. I remember we had a lot of fun. We had, I had a guy try to fight my brother because my brother kicked his ass so badly that the guy was like, that's cheap. And he's like, literally, this is how the cards work. I do not know. And he was like, you cheated. You used this. And he's like, no, I didn't. Like, get a ruling. Like, that's, you double it and then you add, like, that's just, you lost by 130. And that's, I get that you're mad that happened, but you initiated the battle. And then the guy got really mad and like tried to fight my brother. That's so funny to me.
Some of this starts hitting familiar to me. Like I like chess, and it's one of those, like, tournaments are fun, but they also take a lot of time. And I used to do them when I was younger and stuff. Kind of got into it too late to ever be really good at chess. If you want to be a good chess player, you better be started by like age 7 at the latest if you want any shot of being truly great. But a lot of the same dynamics where you have these, wonder kids that are really amazing, age 7. I have a kid, he slipped through my fingers, Jeff. There's a 7-year-old out here that I almost beat. And it was my last chance to beat him, and he's going to be great. And that was it, like, out of my league now.
Yeah.
But to that point, at these fucking tournaments, sorry, I'm dropping another F-bomb, never be the person that starts a fight over a game for like the other PSA we're going to throw out here, because that kind of stuff shows up in other things. Activities where you have adults and kids or mismatch stuff, money mismatches, the people that get upset and want to fight, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Jeff, we've definitely, I mean, I'm happy to talk a little more and stuff, but we've definitely hit the requisite stuff. Are there other specific topics?
This is so a little bit longer. And I understand that we're probably, for the next 2 episodes of this show, we're probably not going to go this long. And I actually, it's my bad for focusing too much on the sets and everything like that. I don't even think we really necessarily talked about the play, which is like the phases and like activate, control, deploy, battle, move, end. There's other stuff like
I can rewind that. This is going to get cut. I can rewind this. You actually were like, yeah, I don't want to talk that. And I agree. Like, there are videos of here's how to play. And I'm saying this as a nerd guy. I found those boring. I found these stories of you breaking tournaments fascinating, engaging. I do actually kind of want to make a cut of that. And like I said, yeah, nerd extras. Jeff May, the Billy Bean of Star Wars CCG. I'm really looking forward to. I think I didn't know if you had any other comments bashing the follow-up from Wizards of the Coast. I am kind of shocked that failed, because you literally have the biggest card company with the designer of the biggest card game getting the biggest IP at the time. The fact that it failed so spectacular is just kind of weird.
No, it's not. It's not weird at all. It makes perfect sense. Who did they screw over?
Decipher? Fans?
Who would have played that game?
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Who's left to play that game? If card-playing Star Wars fan nerds are basically robbed of their hobby that they have invested thousands of dollars in and probably thousands of hours in, why would they ever reward you with thousands of more dollars to start a new game that you're just going to say, fuck it with? No, we weren't interested in that. Were there some? Sure. But I remember when that happened. I remember specifically when that happened because we went on the forums and we were like, screw this. And some people were like, well, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm like, I'm not. Why would I do that? Why would I reward them for taking my favorite pastime and throwing it out? It's not
But
like they were like, oh, this didn't work and we fell through. Now, it was a business decision. And I don't know if Lucasfilm lost or made money in this decision, but what I'm saying is I don't have to give them that. And if they were, who are you going to court? If you're trying to court the people that you just screwed over, you are a moron. So now you have to try to get new people to sign up for this game. But those people would have been playing the Decipher game already. So they basically created a situation where they couldn't win.
But to that point, was the game good at all? I mean, you kind of gave the implication that it was
Not
not even
particularly. It was like there were different like battle arenas. It just wasn't great. And they, Star Wars card gaming kind of fell by the wayside for a while after that. And I think they went the miniature game, I think, was the one that really kind of came through on that. But it was just a bad move by Lucasfilm. It was a bad faith move by Lucasfilm. And that is unfortunate because they lost a lot of dedicated fans that were going to be spending money. And that kind of really tanked Decipher as well. Decipher tried keeping the game mechanic going with a game called Wars, which you can find packs of that for dirt cheap. I mean, they're nothing, but it was like this kind of a similar game mechanic. So you could play Star Wars cards with the Wars thing and it would kind of stick in the same thing, but it just didn't stick. It wasn't the same. So we did really lose out on the episode 2 and 3 stuff, but the players committee at starwarsccg.org, they were making the Count Dooku card, or like that's what they were doing. Or General Kenobi, like that was them. So yes, you can get a General Grievous card. It's a digital download. It is free. And you can access it at starwarsccg.org, which I think is great. I really appreciate these people.
But it does sound like, at least on your personal story. So it sounds like you really got into this. You and your brothers bonded over it.
Mhm.
You would do stuff for fun. It was brain teasers to you. You both competed and then helped elevate your brother to number one. We're going to say that.
For
Number
a
one in
half
the
second,
Cassian
yeah.
region. It counts. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
right.
It's there. So that's freaking amazing from yours. And then does it sound like basically after this, because you were saying you were into it through college, was this kind of the end point for you, or did you just because like for me, I just kind of phased out because not enough people were interested in it. I got to high school, I did other stuff like chess, etc.
So there were things that I figured out. Actually, weirdly enough, one of the last times that I played before I moved to California was at That's Entertainment in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is actually where I work. I worked at that comic shop for a while, and there was a group of local players that came out to play. Now, again, they had been playing consistently for, the 8 or 10 years since it had canceled, since the show was done. I'm still friends with some of those guys on Facebook. They actually saw the thing that I posted in the forum. So they're there still. They're still playing and active and whatever. And just nice guys, nice people that were, I was like, look, I haven't played this game in forever. And we just had fun. And that was really what it came down to is this still a fun game? And I still think it is. I'm not caught up on all the new sets. I haven't used virtual cards ever. If I tried to play now, I would be humiliated. But this was the feather in my nerd cap was my dedication to this game back when it was out, my ability at this game. I was good. I was locally great. I happened to be pretty good, once I learned how to do it. Were there people better than me locally? There sure were. But I was pretty good and I loved doing it. I loved figuring it out. I loved sneaking around the main goals that people had to see what I could do with the limited amount of cards that we had.
That is freaking awesome. I'm gonna kind of start winding us down. I'm gonna say this show, Jeff, has exceeded my expectations. I'm really curious to see who is going to come out to comment to give a throwback to the last nerd show. I just have to put this on air, Jeff, because it'll disappear. And I would actually like to do a follow-up discussion at some point about the follow-up to the Tick episode, because you actually went to Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm apologizing for butchering the name. You met like one of the original colorists of the Tick, Ben
Not in
Edlin.
Worcester. So that was at
Yeah,
it
so
was
I'm trying to
Brockton.
impugn different parts of Boston.
Yeah. No, well, Worcester is Worcester. Brockton is closer to Boston. Brockton is famously, if you want to talk about an intersection of my interests, the homes of Rocky Marciano and Marvelous Marvin Hagler. That is where they came out. Brockton is a boxing mecca. Not what you'd consider a tourist destination. Brockton is not it's gross. But so is Worcester. So whatever. But I did go to New England Comics. I did meet Bob, who was the colorist on the Chromatic, as well as being like an art director for the project. I did buy some stuff while I was there. I got the Tick #8 Virgin cover. I bought the first Tick merch that ever existed, which was a pin set, like a button set. And he was like, "Don't open that," and I was like, "Okay."
Well, at some point, yeah, it's funny that the good news about this show, I'll say, is like it's growing to the point where the supplementary content stuff I would like to do, it's not even a matter of like being like, "Hey, Jeff, let's do this." It's like you and I are just busy and don't have time. But it's been fantastic, and this show was great. But I did want to give a shout out to that.
Shout out to Ben Edlund for
that was wild
to the show.
That was wild, and I did not know what to like when that happened. I didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah,
like,
the fact that Ben Edlund quote tweeted and said he listened to the show and enjoyed it. That to me, where I was like, "Ooh, Senpai noticed us."
And yeah, like that was one where I mean, let's throw this out there. I'm not throwing them under the bus because I love a lot of creators. There's certainly creators that search their name and like just you'll see they go on a spree in a day. There's a day where they're feeling good about themselves. They find 10, 20 people that like their stuff and retweet it or say thanks. Ben Edlund, if you look at his Twitter, it's pretty inactive. He does like once a month.
Yeah.
So when he did that, I was just like, I wasn't expecting. I mean, I tagged him, of course, on the initial tweet, but when that came out, I was just like, this is special and this means a lot to me. And that was wild. And then, Ben, if you're listening to this follow-up, thank you so much. That made, I'll speak for you too, Jeff. That made my day so much. I didn't know what to do with it when it happened.
Yeah, it was really, really great. It was a very, very great experience. And I'm very happy that I got to go to New England Comics because I'd never been. We talked about it on that episode. And, as far as Star Wars goes, if cards come across me in the wild, I still buy them. I still pick them up. I still play them. I recently went through and sort of found all my cards that were like more valuable because these cards, because they're not being made anymore, the cards are worth some of them are worth a fortune, especially in high grades. Like, when you look at cards like, and I'm holding them here, but I have foil versions of like Qui-Gon, the foil Qui-Gon, this 3PO with his parts showing foil. Right here, I have Darth Maul. I have the Grand Admiral Thrawn is a surprisingly valuable card.
Oh, extended universe.
Yeah. And Reflections 3. And, the Qui-Gon and the 3PO with his parts showing, I think they sell for like, $500 to $600. That's not bad for a card that, the pack cost me $5. They've really held on to their value. It is a testament to the game itself, the people at Decipher and the fan community. It really is a testament to how amazing and wonderful this game actually was. And for 6 years, we lived like kings, man.
And then Lucasfilm did the prequels and happened in real life and happened to that as well. All right, Jeff, I'll let you get the last word. Go straight to plugs.
The last word for the Star Wars CCG is this is a game that it really had a lot of great momentum, and the rug was pulled out under it by the people that owned the property. It was a mistake. They didn't think it was a mistake because they were going to Wizards of the Coast, who published Magic the Gathering. This game is still popular because of the fans. And it's hard to view other games as having the support because they'll never Magic the Gathering and Pokemon. I don't ever see stopping. Like I don't ever see them stopping. This was murdered and resurrected by the fans in ways that it's hard to understand. It's hard to see a fan community be that aggressively supportive of something, that it's
in a positive way.
Yes, that it's still going strong over 20 years after it was killed. People still do pack breaking videos, which I'm going to do that too. It's just, check out starwarsccg.org. You can literally play the entire game for free. They'll give you access to it, GEMP. You can learn about the process, learn about the cards. There are great community resources like the Star Wars CCG Facebook page. If you even just look up Star Wars CCG on YouTube, you can learn a lot. I've seen a lot of guys post videos of like how to play if you're a newcomer, like welcome to the game. It's a very welcoming community too. And I just kind of am on the sidelines now watching people. But it's just great, man. I just friggin' love it.
Love it. All right. So Jeff, you do a lot of stuff. You're everywhere on the internet. Let's talk about the stuff that gets you paid first, and then the stuff where other people can find you if they want even more of you.
Well, if you're listening to this for free, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your ears and your attention, and I sure would like your money. You can also access this show as well as shows like Jeff Has Cool Friends at patreon.com/JeffMay. You get early access to uncensored episodes with bonus content, as well as Patreon exclusives like Ugh Fine with Kim Crawl, and more coming. I'm literally right about to reevaluate my entire tier. It's going to be more affordable for some, which I'm very excited about. I'm going to start doing more things on there. We're going to be doing more aggressive, like pack breaking videos. I have lots of stuff behind me of opening that I'm very excited about. And again, that you can check that out at patreon.com/JeffMay, JEFFMAY, all one word. You can also hear me on Gamefully Unemployed's Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, as well as you can hear me on Unpopular Opinion and You Don't Even Like Sports, a sports podcast for people who don't like sports, available at the Unpops Network. And if you want to see me live, the second Friday of every month at Blast from the Past on Magnolia in beautiful Burbank, California, come on down to Mint on Card. That's pretty much it, right? Is that it? Do I cover everything? Follow me on social media at Hey There Jeffro.
Oh, perfect. And the YouTube channel now. And
that's right. Yeah.
Throw this out there, Jeff. This is important. We'll give you a little button to everybody listening. I'll do my plugs and include those in that. Find me most places as Nerd Numbers, and on, I think it's been actually going every Wednesday, but Wednesdays at about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've been on twitch.tv/RicksterGT. We have been playing a lot of Super Metroid. That's been a ton of fun. What I'm also going to throw out, of course, is the Nerd Podcast with Dre and Jeff on this network that you're listening to now. Something we are looking forward to in the future is adding more bonus content. As Jeff mentioned, right now it's available for free. We give you everything with the exclusion of the missing He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special. If you're a free listener and go, where is that? You got to subscribe. If you subscribe, you get to hear that. That's one piece of bonus content now. But Jeff, we're going to start adding more bonus content. And for this season, we're doing collectible card games. Jeff, we're going to have to do some unboxing, some unpacking. So I'm going to throw that out to you. If you're listening to this show, go look at patreon.com/JeffMay, because I guarantee you there's going to be a tier that's going to give you access to Jeff pack breaking. There's going to be access to Jeff doing pack breaking of 2 premier sets. I couldn't spring for the Reflections, Jeff, too expensive, but we're going to do
You didn't want to pay $150 to watch me open a pack of cards?
I really did. And at one point, Jeff, I saw that like Jabba's Palace was like $300 for a box. And was like, is there a way
I would be
buy
furious
this?
if you bought that.
No, Jeff. Just to be clear on that case, the logistics got in the way where it's like, could I buy this box, get Jeff half the packs, get me half the packs? Right now, too much. I'm really hoping at some point this show gets big enough and there's enough demand where that could be a thing we could do.
Yeah.
So keep your ears peeled for that.
Yeah.
If you're a Patreon subscriber, you've seen it. If you're not, reason to become a Patreon subscriber.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Heck yeah. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Nerd. If you want to help keep the podcast growing, it's definitely worth your while to head over to patreon.com/JeffMay. And also you'll get bonuses and early access to cool stuff. Cool stuff like videos of Jeff showing off awesome collectibles and doing pack-breaking videos. It'd be worth your while to check out Jeff May's YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@HeyThereJeffro. That's spelled JEFFRO. And shocker, that is also his Twitter and Instagram account as well. So follow Jeff everywhere. You can find me most places on the internet as @nerdnumbers. Also, shout out to Chris Haugen for the outro theme of Pure Magic. Thanks so much, and we'll be back with another nerdy subject soon.